Hey guys, Jake from Optimus Futures here, bringing you a brand new Optimus Community video. And the topic of today's video is going to be a different focus on the topics we usually post here. We usually like to focus on the software side of things, primarily the platforms that our traders use, the features of those platforms. But today we're going to talk about what actually drives these platforms and what drives our computers to make these platforms run efficiently. And that's hardware. Now we're making this video because a great question was asked by one of our forum members, Toontime. As you can see, it's currently on the screen right now. Now Toontime asked, essentially, what is the best way to maximize his trading performance, what he can do to make his computer better? Does he need to build a new computer? And we figured that many of you have the same question out there. We really tend to see that many traders are so focused on the software that they're using to drive their platform that they tend to forget about what is making these platforms run, what is making them run efficiently and maximizing their performance. And that's the hardware. People love to forget about the hardware. They want to blame their computer for running slow, but really hardware comes down to it. It's really all about the hardware you put into your PC. What you put into it is what you can expect to get out. So now that we've covered that we're going to be talking about hardware, let's dive into it. And the first thing I wanted to mention is there's no need to overcomplicate things. Humans love to overcomplicate and love to overthink things, especially when it comes to trading. We tend to see that many traders love to overcomplicate their methods and their methodology and just the way they approach trading in general. And you know there's a reason why people coin the phrase KISS, or keep it simple stupid. And that's for the reason that keeping it simple is probably the best approach you can have to anything in life. The more you tend to overcomplicate things, the more you tend to drown out your true focus on what you need to be focused on. Now that being said, this can be translated well into computers. Traders and computer builders love to overcomplicate the things they put into their PC or the whole process in general. They think that spending $5,000 to $10,000 on a PC is going to maximize their performance, make them place the best trades because of their super lightning quick computers. Guys, there's no need to overcomplicate it. Yes, the more money you do put into your PC, the more performance you will get out of it. Don't get me wrong. But at some point, there are diminishing returns to the amount of money that you put into your PC. And at a certain point, the average PC user or trader isn't going to notice the additional performance for the amount of money they put into that computer. Now, that being said, if you do utilize programs such as AutoCAD or Adobe Photoshop, you may want to invest a bit more into your computer. This can also go for traders or just users in general that maybe crypto mine or do use their computers for things like deep learning. In those cases, you may want to invest the extra money into a computer, as things like advanced graphic cards and processors will really utilize those programs. But if you're just an average PC user or trader, I don't think it's necessary to spend more than $2,000 or so on a computer. That being said, it's all personal preference. If you have the capital to do so, you're more than welcome to. But since we got that out of the way, let's focus on the actual hardware that should go into a trading computer. And before we talk about hardware specifics, I'd like to just bring up the topic that PC users have a couple options of purchasing computers. Now you have your first generalized mainstream manufacturers out there, such as HP, Dell, Lenovo. These companies provide pre-built computers with their own components within it. These computers are very reliable. Some of them can be very speedy and quick. And they also come with warranty, which is a great benefit. That being said, many of these computers are a bit overpriced for the hardware that's put into them. You have to think that these computer manufacturers have to make their money somehow, so they do overcharge a bit on the product that they put into the PC, as well as the whole manufacturing process in general. You are paying a large sum of money just for having these manufacturers build your computer for you. Now we have the other side of things, where the user can pick the PC parts for themselves and have a third-party manufacturer build it for them. Many of your PC part builders out there utilize this method of PC building. Companies such as NZXT, you can pick the parts you want, you can send them the list. For about MSRP prices, they will purchase these parts, build a computer for you, and then round out all the prices, including the manufacturing process, and charge you based off of that. So for those PC enthusiasts or traders that want the best of the best products, but are fearful about building the PC themselves, this option may be for you. May be the best bang for your buck rather than buying the mainstream retailers out there. And our final option is for those users that wish to buy their own parts and wish to build their PC for themselves. Many people are intimidated by the fact of building their own PC, and rightfully so. Things can go wrong, but honestly, guys, it is way easier than it seems. Many people love to compare the process of Lego building for adults. There's really only one way certain plugs can go in on one location within the building process. Yes, it can get confusing if you don't know what you're doing, but that's why you do a bit of research beforehand. Even the least tech-savvy person out there can build a PC. There's plenty of information out there to get started on building a PC. But since we've covered that out of the way, let's focus on the parts that go inside of it. All right, so first up on our list here is your storage device. Now, many people tend to look at this as one of the last aspects that you put into your computer, but I want to focus on this first for one reason specifically. Your storage device can astronomically increase your performance on the computer. Now, you may be wondering why, and that's because the specific storage device that I'm about to recommend is much faster than the average storage device that you may be familiar with. Now, you're probably familiar with your average hard drive. Now, the average hard drive typically utilizes an actual disk that spins within the hard drive itself. Now, this disk actually creates for a much slower processing speed. The part that I recommend you get as a trader is called an SSD or a solid state drive. The solid state drive actually eliminates the disk within the hard drive, so the way it processes memory and storage is much, much faster. Now, what I recommend anybody who has a SSD doing, if you are building your own PC, is to install your operating system, which for many of you would be Windows, onto your SSD device, as well as any trading platforms that you may be using to also install them on your SSD device. You would be surprised how fast your computer would start up with the operating system installed on the SSD. It's really a night and day difference. This alone can make your PC 10 times faster than if you just had it installed on your standard hard drive. Now, for installing your operating system to the SSD, it's fairly simple. There are other YouTube videos on it out there. Like I said, this video is going to be focused on hardware, not software. So for your storage device, I recommend an SSD, preferably an M2 drive, and at least 250 gigabytes. The more gigabytes you put in, the less you have to worry about your hard drive filling up, your SSD, But you can also invest into an additional hard drive, an actual hard disk, maybe a 7200 RPM hard drive. The 7200 RPM represents how fast the disk is spinning. So the higher RPM you have in your hard drive, the faster it will process your storage memory. Next up, on the topic of memory, let's focus on RAM, or random access memory. Now, your RAM is pretty dependent on the motherboard you'll be using for your PC. and your motherboard is dependent on the CPU, the central processing unit of your PC. I recommend finding one of the latest CPUs that will utilize DDR4 RAM, as this is one of the faster methods of RAM right now when it comes to price to speed ratio. I recommend getting a minimum of 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you opt for more, I would go with the 32 gigabytes of RAM. Any more than that in the current market is probably overkill, unless again you are using programs such as AutoCAD or maybe Photoshop, or you create music, something like that where you need a very fast processing speed. 16 gigabytes is more than enough for the average user, more than enough for probably even users of AutoCAD or things like that. But again, it's all personal preference. I suggest 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM minimum. Now, as for the motherboard that you'll be choosing for your PC, like I mentioned previously, this is pretty solely dependent on the CPU that you'll be getting. You need to make sure that the CPU socket in your motherboard fits correctly with the CPU that you'll be getting. Once you have that figured out and got that out of the way, you can start looking into more expensive motherboards. Again, a more expensive will definitely give you a better performance for sure, but it's not absolutely necessary to get the best motherboard on the market. I would suggest focusing more on a better CPU and a better graphics card. But again, there are some limitations to this. Being that this conversation on the motherboard is so dependent on the CPU that you'll be choosing, let's focus on the CPU next. Now for the CPU, your first decision will come down to whether or not you would like an Intel product, or we have the AMD products. Now they're both great. Intel is by far the most popular and the most relevant. However, AMD is quickly rising in those charts to compete with Intel. Now, the type of chip that you get is really personal preference. I personally prefer the Intel products, as the Intel products also come with an integrated graphics processing unit within the chip. Now, if you don't need a great graphics card, or you opt to not get one at all to save some money, the Intel chips are going to be for you. Now, if you are looking to get a separate dedicated graphics card, maybe an AMD chip will be up your alley. Again, I personally like the Intel chips much better, but the new Ryzen chips are great. If you're focusing on Intel, I would suggest to get at least a 7th generation chip from the i5 or the i7 series, preferably something with at least 3.2 to 3.4 gigahertz to optimize your processing power. The more cores, in my opinion, the better. The more threads, the better. If you look at something like the i5 8600K, you can overclock this card, which I wouldn't suggest for your average trade. I don't think there's any reason to overclock your card. But again, the Intel chips come unlocked with the K series, so that is an option for those users that wish to overclock. But if you look at that chip, for example, it has 6 cores, 6 threads. You can allocate these cores to many of the trading platforms out there, so it is possible to utilize multiple instances of these trading platforms and essentially use one trading platform as the master and the rest as slaves that receive data from the master program. But again, all of this is purely preference. I suggest something with at least 3.2 to 3.4 gigahertz. And if you're looking at the Intel side of things, at least a 7th generation chip, once again, from the i5 or the i7 series. Now onto your graphics card. If you have elected to go the AMD route, and you don't have a graphics card processing unit built within your chip, otherwise known as integrated graphics, or you just want that extra graphic processing power, you're going to need a graphics card. Now, for trading alone, you don't need the best graphics card on the market. You can definitely save some money in this section. There are graphics cards solely dedicated to workstations. However, the gaming graphic cards out there right now are probably the best option on the market for the price points that they're at. These things can process graphics with great detail. They're extremely powerful. And the bit dated ones are becoming much, much cheaper for the performance that you can get out of them. Now, preference wise, I like the 10 series by NVIDIA. I would suggest to look for a graphics card that comes with at least 3 gigabytes of dedicated RAM on board. And since we are traders and focusing on trading, I would suggest to find a graphics card that supports at least more than 2 monitors, because I think multiple monitors in a setup is extremely beneficial for traders. So once again, I'd recommend a graphics card coming from the NVIDIA line, preferably at least a 1050 Ti. Anything above the 1050 Ti will give you better performance for your bargain. But again, I think the 1050 Ti is a great starting level for its price point. If you want to go into the AMD side of things, you could potentially look at the RX 570. This is pretty comparable to the 1050. But again, I truly prefer NVIDIA. I think they've been around a bit longer and they've been focused on the graphics card markets. AMD is slowly starting to dive into it. But I personally just think NVIDIA supports and has much better hardware. So that's pretty much all you'll need for the internals wise. You will need a a power supply unit. This depends on all the parts that you end up picking for your computer. I would look for something with a gold stamp on it. The gold represents that it's essentially a more efficient power supply unit. There are 3 variants: bronze, silver, gold. Again, it's personal preference, but you'll get the best performance out of the gold power supply units. Next up, we have our mounts, desk stands, and monitors. So, being that we are traders, I would suggest to utilize more than one monitor, as I suggested in the graphics card portion of this video. I think multiple monitors is a great way to utilize trading. You're able to put more than one platform on more than one monitor. So if you need to, you can monitor the main price action on one of your monitors and have your dome up on the other to execute your trades. Or if you're viewing multiple symbols or multiple markets, you can organize your monitors in a specific way that helps you. If you are using only one monitor, I think you can still get great performance out of it. But to maximize efficiency, I would definitely suggest for multiple monitors. When it comes to mounting these monitors, there's many desk mounts that are now available on Amazon and other retailers out there. You can go for a more permanent route and wall mount it. But either way, when using multiple monitors, I would suggest to mount it in one way or in another. This will allow you to flip them in portrait mode or just orient your monitors in a way that best suits you and prevent you from having to move your head back and forth, back and forth. Now, when it comes to PC building, it's definitely an intimidating process. Many people would rather not build their PC because they're afraid that their parts won't work in unison or things like that. Because of that, I'd like to suggest this website right here, PC Part Picker. Now you can actually go in here and select, starting from your CPU, and build a system from the ground up. This website will make sure that everything is compatible with your parts. The parts that you add to this build will automatically be configured by PC Part Picker to work together. So if we add an i7 8700K to our list here, we can already see that Our PC needs at least 95 watts of power going to it. This will help you out when picking a power supply unit. And the rest of the parts we put into our build will be geared around this i7-8700K. That way you can't accidentally pick the wrong motherboard. Once you pick the motherboard, you can't accidentally pick the wrong memory or the wrong cooler, etc., etc. I think PC Part Picker is a great website for those users to utilize picking and building their own PC, or for those users that want to pick their own parts and have a third-party manufacturer build their PC for them. Other than that, guys, hardware-wise, I don't think there's too much to focus on. Toontime did ask about internet connection and bandwidth. I would suggest trying to get the fastest internet connection available in your area. I think at least 100 megabytes is probably necessary for good latency and execution when trading. I understand that that isn't available everywhere around the world, so opt in for the best internet speed that you can purchase. On the topic of internet, I would always also suggest to hardwire your PC. This provides with the lowest latency and the best internet connection and the most reliable internet connection. But guys, that just about wraps this video up. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there's no need to overcomplicate things in life. And for that reason, we're not going to overcomplicate this video or the hardware that we suggest. If you do have further questions on this topic, feel free to visit this board on our community. There's a whole forum post here talking about hardware and different suggestions and thoughts on the hardware that can go into a trading PC. If you have questions, like I said, please ask them in this thread or post them in the comments of this video. We'd love to help you out with building a trading PC. And I hope this video helped out any users that had any questions on building a PC or trading PCs in general. Until next time, guys. Thanks for watching. If this video helped, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more informative content related to the futures market.